Do you have something to say? Are there people who want or need to hear from you? Have you always wanted to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Welcome to Resonate Media, where our mission is to amplify you. At Resonate Media, we focus on helping underrepresented voices and aspiring podcasters get started by providing equipment, expertise, and experience to help you launch a podcast. To get started, visit ResonateMediaPro.com. Don't let the confusion, complications, and costs of hosting, recording, editing, and distribution hold you back. The world needs to hear what you have to say. Resonate Media can help your voice be heard.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to All Things Episcopal, where we talk about everything and anything related to the Episcopal Church. This podcast was designed with young people in mind, so ages specifically 18 to 39. And it's a place to learn more about the Christian faith, specifically through the Episcopal lens. With this podcast in particular, we're going to offer a variety of ways to learn about the Episcopal Church. Some of these learning opportunities will come through conversations and interviews, sermons, and the reading of the daily office. We'll talk a little bit about that. We also want you to know that while we love our clergy, we also cherish the ministry of the laity. The laity, as our Book of Common Prayer says, is to represent Christ and his church, to bear witness to him wherever they are, and according to the gifts given to them, to carry on Christ's work of reconciliation in the world, and to take their place in the life, worship, and governance of the church. Which is why we have laity represented in the planning and production of this podcast, along with clergy. We also deeply care about this podcast being a representation of the whole body of Christ, which means you're going to hear from a diverse group of voices. So in traditional Episcopal greeting fashion, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
And also with you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to All Things Episcopal. Today is a very special episode for a couple of reasons. The first is that this is the season finale of our first season of All Things Episcopal. And the second is we have a special guest, the Right Reverend Diane Jardine Bruce. She is currently serving as the Bishop Provisional for the Diocese of West Missouri. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the Episcopate is. We're going to hear Bishop Diane's story and the role and function of a bishop, because after all, the Episcopal Church is a church of bishops. And the last thing to note is that season 2 episodes will be released in October. So be anxiously awaiting for those episodes to be released. So without further ado, how are you doing, Bishop Diane?
Well, I'm doing great, and I'm just so excited to be with you all. So what do you want to know?
We want to know all the things.
Woo! There's a lot of things.
Our first question for you, and we've collected questions from college students, from folks who are not Episcopalian, and some folks who are not even Christian that have questions for you. So our first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you found the Episcopal Church? Were you raised in the Episcopal Church or not?
No, I was actually raised in the Roman Catholic Church. I was going to be a nun, which you could do as an entering freshman in high school. And the summer before I was supposed to start my novitiate as an incoming freshman, I got kissed by a boy and decided if God made something feel that good, I could not take the chastity vow. So it was, kind of hard to feel called to serve and not be able to kind of answer that call, because, you start thinking about, things like boys. So I went to UC Berkeley, for my undergrad, I was a linguistics major. My junior year, I took a series of tests to decide what you should be when you grow up. And the woman asked me, "What's your major?" I said, "Linguistics." And she said, "Linguistics?" I said, "Yeah, linguistics." She said, "Well, the first thing the tests indicate you should be is a priest. And the second thing it indicates you should be as a banker." And I thought, and I said to her, this was a waste of my time. I'm a Roman Catholic woman. I was engaged to be married to somebody else at that point, not my husband. I didn't marry that person. But I said that I can't add two and two. I could never be a banker. This is crazy. And so, put a pin in that little piece, because, when something is absurd that somebody tells you, it just goes out of your mind and you never think about it again. Well, that was one of those things that comes up later. When I was 30, I was visiting one of my college roommates in her home in Albuquerque, and I was pregnant with our daughter. And it turned out that I had developed an allergy in that pregnancy to cats, and she had cats. So we went up to Espanola, New Mexico, to the home of her parents. Her mother was from England and was a priest in the Episcopal Church. Her father was a physicist at Los Alamos Lab. Her mother said to me on Saturday night, "Come to the Episcopal Church tomorrow, Diane, darling. It won't hurt you." And so the next day I went to church, and it was like, smells the same, looks the same. Where's my monthly missalette? There was, and it just felt the same. And then we sat around my friend's mother's pool after the service, talking about the differences between the Episcopal Church and the Roman Catholic Church. And I went home and told my husband, who was actually a cradle Episcopalian, but he stopped going to church after high school. I said, "That's it. We're Episcopalians." And so we started going to the Episcopal Church. I gave birth to my daughter, and then when she was about 3 months old, I was going to. I said my son wasn't feeling well. Max wasn't feeling well, so I said to my husband, "I just fed her. I was breastfeeding. I just fed her. There are no bottles in there. I'm going to go to mass really quickly. I will be back. Do not panic. Do not panic." And he said, "Do not leave me with this child." And I said, "You'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine." And so I go to service, and there was a woman celebrating the Eucharist. I've seen that before. No, I've seen that. I'd seen that before. I was a seasoned veteran of all of 3 months in the church, right? 4 months, 5 months in the church. And I was driving home, and I didn't even stop. I didn't even go see her at the door. I just went out the side door, because I was determined to get back before my husband panicked. And so I felt like an elephant was standing on my chest. I thought I was having a heart attack. I pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned it off. And I unlocked my door, thinking, I don't want anybody to break into my car. And then all of a sudden, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And then my windshield became like a video, where it was that early call to serve as a nun. And it was that fateful first kiss. All of this was in the windshield. And then it was the woman at the Ed Center that I said, "Oh my God," that I said, this just wasn't helpful for me. And I had totally forgotten that. Totally put that in my mind. And I thought, holy moly, I was a banker at Wells Fargo Bank at the time. And oh my God, I can be a priest. And then the woman that celebrated the Eucharist was in all her vestments, was in my windshield. And then my face became her face. And there was this big booming voice in the car saying to me, "When are you going to stop running and say yes to me?" And I eked out a little, "Okay." And the elephant stepped off my chest, and it took me 45 minutes for me to get use of my legs back. So, because I was like shaking. And then I was driving up, of course, I knew I was late. When you breastfeed, when you're, overdue. And I pull up to the curb in front of the house. He comes running out with the screaming baby and says to me, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What happened?" And I said, "What if I told you I have to be a priest?" And he looked at me and he says, "As long as you don't give up on sex, I don't care." And he hands me the baby. Now, when I had to write all of this out for when I was nominated for bishop, he said, "You can't say that I said that." And I said, "Well, what am I supposed to say?" He says, "Well, say that as long as you don't have to take a vow of chastity." I said, "But Stephen, that's not what you said." And he says, "Well, they'll think I'm a sex fiend." And I said, "Stephen, we're married. We have children. People do the math." And so anyway, so that's the story of, and then it, I started to almost start the process in the Diocese of California, but my husband got transferred, and then I needed to be resident in the diocese 2 years before they'd even look at me in Los Angeles. And so from the time that piece happened to the time I was ordained was 10 years.
Wow. Wow. That is a long journey. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I think a lot of our listeners are going to be fascinated by your story. So as we mentioned earlier, the Episcopal Church is a church of bishops. So for our listeners who might not be as familiar with the Episcopal Church, what is the role and function of a bishop within the Episcopal Church?
The role of a bishop is really that of chief pastor for not only the clergy, but the entire flock. And so in our denomination, what that means is I have oversight of all the clergy, and lay leaders and lay people too, in the sense that if things are happening or things are changing or things need to change, you work through the bishop. We have something called the Constitution and Canons of the Episcopal Church, and each diocese has their own Constitution and Canons. And the Constitution and Canons of each diocese have to reflect the Constitution and Canons of the Episcopal Church. And those kind of guide us in terms of what we can do. So we have 4 orders of ministry. I think the most powerful order of ministry is the laity, because there's so many of them and there's so few of the other layers. So we love our laity, and the bishops work to care for them in terms of providing programming for teaching, all of that other stuff. Then we have deacons who really take the church out into the world and bring the world back into the church in terms of their call to ministry. And then we have priests that can do 3 things that a deacon can't do. They can absolve, bless, and consecrate. So we call it the ABC: absolve, bless, and consecrate. So that is really they have more of a sacramental role. And then you have bishops. So bishops, or one level above that. And what a bishop can do that a priest can't do is a bishop can ordain a priest or a deacon. A priest cannot ordain a deacon. Only a bishop can do that. And so we are responsible for the whole entire ordination process of people that are seeking ordination. But more, we also do things like bless chrism for the anointing at baptism. We also confirm, receive, and reaffirm people that are making those steps after their initial baptism, right? If you were baptized as a baby, sometimes you're confirmed as a high school student, sometimes it's an adult. If you were baptized and confirmed in for example, the Roman Catholic Church, we would receive you into this arm of God's body or Christ's body. And if you've been baptized and confirmed in the Episcopal Church, but something's happened in your life that you want to, that calls you to want to do this again, then we call that a reaffirmation, and the bishop can only do that. Does that make sense?
Most definitely. And both what you just said in terms of role and function of a bishop, as well as your story, you talked about discernment. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your discernment to the priesthood versus the discernment to the episcopate, which is being a bishop, and how that process worked for you.
Well, so you just heard about my discernment to the priesthood. I did not want to be a bishop. I was happy as a clam just being a parish priest. I loved my congregation. We were rocking and rolling. I did 3 services every Sunday, 2 in English, 1 in Spanish. Loved it. And then in the Diocese of Los Angeles, the then Diocesan John Bruno called for the election of 2 suffragan bishops. And so I had all these people coming up to me, my friends in the diocese, saying, "I want to nominate you." And I was like, "No, thank you. No, thank you. No. Oh, no, thank you." And then one of my friends came up to me and said, "Diane, I know you, and I know you haven't taken this to prayer." And I went, "Oh, why?" And so I was on my way to the Holy Land with a group of priests. from England and from the United States. And one of my good friends in the Diocese of Los Angeles was on that trip too. And so one early morning, she and I, at like 5:00 in the morning, walked down to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, so there wouldn't be a cast of thousands down there. And, you go, if you've been there, you go up these steps and there's a hole where they think the cross of Christ was, and there's a stone there. There's the hole, you put your hand in the hole. And it was kind of under reconstruction. So you had to crawl through this little wooden shaft to get to it and put your hand down at that time. And so, because every site that we visited before then, because we were initially asked what needs to be, when we were, our first stop was the Mount Tabor, where the Transfiguration is assumed to have happened. And so it was like, what needs transfiguring? What needs looking at in your life? So, I took this as my, it's like, so every place we stopped in, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that I just talked about was at the very end. Because we'd be at these different holy places. And I'd be like, Lord, got anything for me? Nothing. Okay, Lord, next place. Got anything for me? Not hearing anything. Got anything for me? Nothing. Okay. So I'm taking this as like, this is a done deal. I'm not doing anything. So I'm there in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I say, Lord, this is one of the last places we're stopping. We're going to get on a plane. So if you got some, I got like maybe 2 more stops in me here, but getting close to the end. If you're going to be talking, better start. I'd love you if we're talking now. So I put my hand down in the hole, and then there was that same big booming voice, like in the car, when Diane Marie, your call to the priesthood came from within. You're being called by your peers into a new ministry. You need to engage the process. And I went, all right, I'll engage. So I came out from that little cubby thing, and I turned around, and my girlfriend looked at me and she said, you got your answer. I can see it on your face. I can see it on your face. And I said, I did. And then there was this man, I don't know if he was Greek Orthodox or some Orthodox, was selling candles. And so there was another pilgrim there that was buying a candle. He took one look at my face. He handed me 3 candles, and he went like this, no charge. So whatever was happening there my friend said, you were glowing when you came out of there. And I just went, I don't know about glowing, but I'm like overwhelmed with this. And so when I got back to the United States, I called my mentor, Rector, who was one that was really pushing to nominate me. And I said, okay. And so, but the same week I found out I was nominated, for bishop, I found out I had bilateral breast cancer. And I thought, well, Lord, that's a cosmic joke, because this isn't happening now. But God had another plan. And it was like everything. I can't even begin to describe how this fell into place. Like, I was supposed to be going away for 2.5 weeks to England and Scotland on a mini sabbatical. And they said, the tumors are slow growing. There are 2 different kinds of tumors. I represent 2% of all women with breast cancer. My joke is every woman wants to feel special, just not this way. So I ended up, I went to England and Scotland. 3 days later, I had bilateral lumpectomies. A week later, I was on a plane to finish my Doctor of Ministry coursework at Evanston. I couldn't lift my suitcases. So my seminary friends there, it was so funny. Everybody wanted to meet. I want to go and be with her. So I had three of them decided that they were going to be the representatives coming to get me from the airport. And so, and get me up in my room and do everything, get me set up to where I needed. And then I came back, and then a week later, it was General Convention. It was my first time as a deputy in the House of Deputies. Came back from that. The Saturday after convention ended, convention ended on a Friday. On Saturday, I was interviewed to be Bishop Suffragan of the Diocese of Los Angeles. And on Monday, I had my first round of chemo. And so I went through 4 rounds of chemo and 33 rounds of bilateral radiation. And it was, so when they did the walkabouts, I was bald. I was bald and I was actually skinny because it's not that I was sick. It was just, I was eating so hyper healthy and walking because I had to take drugs. I had to take shots every day to increase my white cell count, which gives you severe bone pain. And so I walked miles every day, which helped curtail the pain. I was like walking like this. And so, but I was buff by the time I got done with chemo. And so, not so buff now, but buff when I had chemo. And then I had radiation after that. So when I was elected bishop on the third ballot, I had like little stubble. So everybody thought I had kind of shaved my head to be a fashion statement, but it was just a little stubble that was coming back. And so, yeah, so that's the story of, being a bishop or getting, so yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, I love how spiritual as well as real your discernment was. And something that I've heard many clergy persons go through, but also like laity, when they're discerning something, it's equal parts your conversation with God and those that love and support you and listening to the wisdom that they have. And it's a beautiful thing when both of those come together. And,
I've always been all my family thought for sure I was going to be a nun. Unfortunately, I got kissed and that just threw that whole thing out the window. But I mean, from the time I was little, everybody assumed I was going to be a nun just because, prayer means everything to me. And I try to live my life as a prayer because I try to live my life that if I die and meet my maker at the mercy seat, I don't have a lot to report. And so, I just think when you have a deep prayer life, and I love Samuel Shoemaker's quote on prayer. Prayer might not change things for you, but it will sure change you for things. And I think that is so true. Think about the prayer that I prayed before the car hit me. Think about the prayer that I prayed, because when you're constantly praying, that's what happens. It's like this natural language that just comes out of you. And it's centering and it's healing and it's whole. And there's like this total connection that happens and it's wonderful. So I try to live my life in constant prayer, which is the reason why sometimes, like when I get in deep prayer, like when I celebrate the Eucharist, the whole service I'm praying. I have been known to get lost because I'm praying and I get lost in the service. Or sometimes, I get a mini, what in some in the vernacular would call a glory spell. And then it's like, I can't speak English. I can't speak Spanish. I can't speak. I don't know what I'm speaking, but it's not coming out any which way good. So, sometimes I get over that. I have to, I trip over my own tongue and, because I celebrate the Eucharist in my native New Jersey, which has been interesting for the Diocese of West Missouri. And then I always do the prayer over the bread in Spanish and most of the prayer over the wine in Mandarin. And so those are two of the languages I studied and which I still study and love. And so anyway, but sometimes I can just trip even over English. It's terrible. It's really, it's sad. It's just sad.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You're a wealth of knowledge and you bring in so much, diverse culture with language, and language is how we make connection, both past and present with our communities. And personally, I love it that you celebrate the Eucharist in 3 different languages, because my spouse, his first language is Spanish. So it's one of the few times I actually get to hear our beautiful liturgy of the table spoken in his native tongue. And it makes the worship that much more rich. But I digress. One of our questions comes to us from a college student, Michaela, and she asks, have you gotten any backlash about being a woman in church leadership, specifically about being a female bishop, and how have you handled that?
Oh, yes. I was ordained or consecrated a bishop in 2010. There were 2 congregations in the Diocese of Los Angeles out of about 135 at that time. where a woman never celebrated the Eucharist at the altar. So I was invited to preach, but not to celebrate. And so, only a man could do confirmations, the whole 9 yards. Well, that has since changed. In fact, I was the first woman to celebrate the Eucharist at both of those altars, because I worked with the congregation and helped them come along the path. Also, when you have a last name like Bruce and you're referred to as Bishop Bruce, most people, if they've never met you and they don't know you, assume you're a man. And when I show up and I'm not even 5 feet tall, so I'm standing in a hole on a good day, they look at it, they say, no, you can't be the bishop. It's like, oh, I got the ring. And so, it's a very interesting thing. And so, and sometimes when I've traveled internationally, not only because I'm from the Episcopal Church, but I'm a woman bishop in the Episcopal Church, I've gotten pushback from some bishops and clergy who do not believe in women's ordination. And in other instances, I was brought in by a primate, a head bishop, presiding bishop, to work with a diocese on what does a woman clergy person look like, act like, talk like, and that's been very comforting. But yes, it's interesting because people assume when they see me in a collar, I'm a nun. Sister, thank you for your work. Oh, you're welcome. I always say you're welcome. I don't correct. What are you going to say? It's like, I'm in Starbucks or I'm in a coffee shop and I'm not going to say, well, I'm actually an Episcopal bishop. So, because then they would just, that would take too much talking. And I want to have my coffee. So.
If I understand correctly, like coffee is the 8th unofficial sacrament of the Episcopal Church.
That would be correct.
Yeah. So I can appreciate that. Our next question comes to us from another college student, Tyler, and she asks, what are your favorite things about being a bishop?
I love confirming. I love being with congregations every Sunday. I'm in a different church every Sunday. The Diocese of West Missouri has 47 active churches, 48, one closed, but we're hoping to do something with that. Diocese of Los Angeles had over 130. So I'm used to being in a different place every Sunday. I love it. I love preaching and teaching. I love talking with people and meeting with people and hearing, their dreams, their hopes, their desires, hearing how, the various ministries they do for outreach into their communities. It's been a real joy. I mean, that's the joy part for me. That it's wonderful. Oh, I also love ordaining new priests because I get to squeeze their head like a melon.
I think the other person on this call, Father Colin, may or may not agree with that.
I have felt those hands squeeze my head like a melon. Yes, and it's powerful.
Our next question, and we already kind of touched on this because you said that you were Bishop Suffragan in the Diocese of Los Angeles, but now you serve as Bishop Provisional in the Diocese of West Missouri. So the question that is being asked is, what are the different types of bishops, such as Suffragan, Provisional, and Diocesan, and do they function differently, or is it just a title difference?
That's an excellent question. So there's actually four canonical, meaning of our laws, bishops, meaning we have canonical responsibility. We also have like a 5th category of a retired bishop that's just helping out, oh yeah, I'll do confirmations for you once a month, or what, I'll do a visitation for you, every other, whatever. So that's called an assisting bishop. Then, the main bishop is always the bishop diocesan. Okay. Bishop diocesan. And that is a person that's in charge of, that has jurisdiction, meaning charge over the entire diocese. And then there's a bishop suffragan, who does not have jurisdiction, but has responsibilities for certain ministries and does everything, is elected the same, consecrated the same. Everything is the same for a suffragan and diocesan. The difference is our function. So before, as a diocesan, I never got the chance. I was never allowed, because it's not canonical, to consent on the election of another bishop. Now that I'm the bishop provisional here, I get to consent to another bishop's election. So a bishop provisional is a bishop diocesan, but without tenure. A bishop diocesan has tenure. A bishop suffragan has tenure. And then there's the bishop assistant. It has to be voted on. They have to go through a whole bunch of steps. It has to be voted on by the standing committee of the diocese and then approved by the House of Bishops. So a bishop assistant is similar to a bishop suffragan. They're there for a specific ministry. However, unlike a bishop suffragan, they do not have tenure. So if the diocesan retires, then the assistant may not be picked up to continue with the new bishop diocesan. Whereas with me, I first served under Bishop Bruno, and then when Bishop Taylor was elected, I served with him as his suffragan, because I have tenure. They kind of can't touch it. And so yeah, that's the difference between the bishops. And so being a bishop provisional is really doing two things. Number one, it's doing all of the same work as a bishop diocesan, but also doing kind of a work of an interim minister to try to bring healing when healing needs to happen, or change things that need to happen within the diocese. So I'm getting them ready. So you can think about it like, maybe you were married and then you got a divorce and then you started dating, and then, you met somebody else and you got married. So I'm kind of the person in that middle that, maybe teaches you how to marry better the next time.
This is a very, very good explanation of it. Another question that we have gotten is, what are some of the most inspiring things you've seen in your call as a bishop?
So early on, I was at an Episcopal school. It was their school day on Sunday. The congregation at this church was very small, but the school was mid-sized. And there was a young girl there. Her name was Katie. And she, I asked her to help me. She was going to stand next. I said, could you stand next to me? And can I ask you to hold my hat for me? My mitre. This is a mitre. Can I ask you to hold? Oh, yes. Yes. And so she was glued to my side. We did the whole service. And then afterwards, there was this big reception. All the families came. Katie's parents, and Katie was Spanish speaking. Her parents and grandparents, her parents spoke her parents spoke okay, good English actually. Her grandparents spoke no English. So Katie brought me over to introduce me to her grandparents and her parents. And she was holding my hand, and I'm speaking to the parents and the grandparents in Spanish, and everybody's getting, it's like they're happy and I'm happy and we're getting along. And then, I said how wonderful it was to have Katie with me. And this was what a beautiful day. Da, da, da. Katie had a charm bracelet, and Katie, as I was leaving, came running up to me, and she pulled one of the charms off of her bracelet, and she handed it to me, and she said, I want you to keep this to always remember me, because I will never forget you. And I was just like, you can't receive that kind of thing and not be totally moved. And, I think my way of being a bishop is being extremely relational. And not all bishops act that way, but I think a growing number of bishops are acting that way more, because it really is all about relationships. And I think in some ways COVID taught us that. But I was that way long before COVID. The newer crop of bishops that are coming into the house are much more relational and less prince or princess bishops. Like, do what I say. It's like that doesn't work anymore. Let's talk. Let's be transparent. Let's work together. Because the bishop doesn't have all the good ideas. But Katie, in that moment, touched my heart in such a way, and so I kept her heart in my my ID badge pass. I had a little carrier thing. I kept it for a long, and then unfortunately, recently I I looked down and it was gone. I have no idea where Katie went, her little thing, but every time I look at my badge, I see it was a heart. It was blue on the outside and pink on the inside. And so I still have it in my mind's eye, even though I physically don't have it anymore. I don't know what happened. And so I don't know where I was, and I'm hoping to find it because it needs to go back into its home, because I will never, ever forget that young woman. She was she was 11 years old. She was 11 years old. And I was just, so that was probably the most profound moment for me. Every time I lay hands on someone for a confirmation, every time I lay hands on someone for an ordination, every time I celebrate the Eucharist, every meeting I have, even the harder ones, it's a joyful event. It's a joyful event.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story about Katie and her inspiring you and your ministry. I think that there's something really beautiful about young people being vessels for the Holy Spirit and God, and to pay attention, to have childlike eyes of faith.
Exactly.
And I think this is a great question. Our last question today is, what is your biggest hope for college and young adults in the Episcopal Church?
Oh, that they feel the love of God in Christ, that they know that wherever you are, you're welcome here. Whoever you are, you're welcome here. Tall, short, fat, thin, gay, straight, non-binary, whoever you are, you're welcome in this church. Because our former presiding bishop, Edmund Browning, said, "This church shall be open to all. There will be no outcasts." And so I think we are that rock, that anchor for people that can feel left out in other spaces. Because if you really look at the sayings of Jesus, one of my last classes in seminary was, what are the true sayings of Jesus? And that was right as the Jesus seminar came out. And so I looked at the four Gospels and Thomas, and I came up with 10 places where Jesus said the same thing in all of them. 10. And you know what it boiled down to, which our presiding bishop keeps on talking about? 1 4-letter word: love. Who's outside God's love and grace? Nobody. Who does not deserve God's? Everybody deserves God's love and grace. And the Episcopal Church is here for that purpose. To love one another, for us to love one another as Christ has loved us. And so anyway, but yeah, so there's a place for you. Please come. Please be part of us. We already love you, and find out what God is calling you to do and who God is calling you to be. Because trust me, church will do that to you. And we've got great clergy here, but no pressure.
Well, thank you so much for answering our questions that were submitted by college students and our listeners. And this is kind of off script a little bit, but would you be willing to pray us out before we do a closing?
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay, so you want me to pray now?
Yes, please.
Okie dokie, I can do that. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Oh, gracious and Holy One, we give you thanks for this time. We give you thanks for your grace and love. Lord, as we end this season of this podcast, may we have more seasons to come, but more, Lord, may people be drawn to this space to know a little bit more about you, to learn how you fit into their lives so that they can be fed by your love and grace so that they can actually feed others around them. For Lord, we're not just takers, we're those who share. May our sharing not only of this podcast, but of the gifts that you give each and every one of us, may they be deep. May they be profound. May college students find the Katies in their life so that they can see you by looking at her. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And Father Colin has a couple of things that he would like to say.
Yes, and I would just like to say thank you, Bishop Bruce, for spending time with us and sharing your story with us. That takes a lot to share some personal side of things with the public, especially on a platform where you can't always see people face to face. And another big thank you to Father David and to Claire and the entire Campus Ministry Commission of the Diocese for putting their input and helping us dream this dream of putting a podcast together. We also want to put a thank you out there to Pastor Lauren Richmond and his team at Resonant Media. Without them, this podcast would not have been as successful as it's been. So we really thank you all. And if you out there are listening and thinking, I would like to do a podcast, then we definitely encourage you to check out Resonant Media. A special shout out to you, our listeners. Thank you for giving us your time and for participating in these conversations with us and giving us questions today for Bishop Bruce to answer for us. If you could get it elsewhere, if you could spend your time elsewhere, you could, but you choose to do that with us and listening to this podcast, and we really, really appreciate that. So again, thank you for listening to All Things Episcopal. We are going to take a short break, as Claire mentioned at the beginning. Episodes will be coming back with season 2 in October, and in the meantime, go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about All Things Episcopal, visit campusministry.diowestmo.org/All Things Episcopal. All Things Episcopal podcast is a production of the Diocese of West Missouri in association with Resonant Media. The Lord be with you all.
Looking for fresh ideas to lead your church in today's changing world? Check out the Future Christian podcast. Each episode features pastors, authors, and faith leaders sharing practical wisdom on ministry, technology, and tackling challenges like pastoral burnout. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or passionate about your faith, we're here to inspire and equip you for impactful ministry. Listen now on your favorite podcast platform.